This seems like a dumb question.
Yeah.
But is it okay to mix all of these in your podcast? Like,
yes.
okay.
Hey, I'm Josh.
And I'm Laura.
And this is the Devising Good podcast, where we talk about how churches, small businesses, and nonprofits can use video to create understanding and provoke action.
Okay. We've talked about why to do a podcast. We've talked about what to think about before you start. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about how to come up with topics, because that seems like that could be a little overwhelming.
Yes, and it is. Yeah, I feel like,
How do you do that?
Coming up with topics, it can be really daunting unless you have a framework or know where to go. So this podcast is literally just going to be, I'm going to give a whole list of stuff. All right, so the first thing is something that the great people at Think Media made me aware of last week, and it's a website called
answerthepublic.com.
If you go there, it is a website that you can type in just like a couple different words, and then it gives you like a whole bunch of different questions that people actually search for.
Oh.
To be honest, I have no idea how they get this information, but like it and they even give you like a ranking of like the darker orange is like more searched than the lighter orange, and it's really, really cool. Catch is, like, they want you to sign up for it, and there's even a paid version that I think gives you more searches, but the catch is, for the free version, you can only do up to 3 searches a day.
Okay.
So maybe like take a week and like try to like figure out all your topics, but go there, type in a couple different keywords, and then kind of look through the suggestions that they give. This helped me in 2 different ways. One, it gave me ideas for different topics. The other thing is it made me realize that the way I was phrasing things, people would be looking for something different.
Oh, got it.
So it was very helpful to know that going into it. Number 2 is listener questions. So we talked a little bit about this in the last episode, but one of the coolest parts about a podcast is like listener engagement, viewer engagement.
Right.
So like I've submitted questions to multiple different podcasts, and it's super fun to like hear their answer to my question.
Sure.
Sometimes they say your name, sometimes they don't. Like, it doesn't matter, but it's like, oh, I participated in that thing, and plus they're actually like answering something I'm super curious about. So now I'm invested in listening to that episode, maybe based off of kind of what's talked about. I actually will share that with other people, which I've done.
Sure.
And so, getting those listener questions. So it's very important to make sure you have a clear and simple way that people can submit their questions. Some podcasts, you text in a number. Some podcasts like this one, you click the link in the description, it takes you to a form, simple form, make sure it's super simple, but then where they can submit their questions.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's one, but then a slightly different twist on that is just asking your audience directly. So the listener questions is a bit more passive, where you make it available, but you're waiting for the response.
Right.
Going to your audience directly and actually asking them is a very proactive, like, all right, I have actual people in mind. I have actual email addresses or phone numbers. And I'm going to go to them directly and say, hey, we're going to start a podcast, and we would love to make it something that's super valuable to people like you. What are some of the things that you're wondering about in this area? What are some of your pain points in this realm, whatever, and just going to them directly and trying to get that information. That's also a great way of doing it, and recording those answers.
Yeah.
This one, and I'm gonna ask you to talk a little bit about this, but map out a list of concepts. So, I remember when you were doing health coaching, like, think back to that time. were there things, because you've done a couple different things. You've done group coaching and you've done one-on-one coaching.
Mm-hmm.
In either or both of those cases, what were things that either you wanted people to know coming into a coaching session, mm-hmm. or just an engagement with you in the first place, or what were maybe like one to three things that you covered as like basic stuff?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing that comes to mind is wanting people to read nutrition labels.
Okay, yeah.
So just getting people to be even aware of what are they putting in their bodies, what are they eating, how do you read a nutrition label, because that can be confusing.
Yeah.
So just kind of the things that would get them started thinking along the lines that I wanted them to be thinking about for
like
change.
Just even awareness of
awareness
what they're
was
doing.
huge. Maybe like helping them think about what's their why for change.
I remember one thing you would always like, the thing that I don't know if this was a preliminary thing or if this was farther down the line, but you're always like, eat the rainbow. Like, like make sure that the vegetables and different things, like there's a bunch of different colors. It's just not all greens, but maybe you throw in some cabbage that's purple or some carrots that are orange, like eating the rainbow was like a big thing because of all the nutrients and things. So
yeah, just ideas of things like that you're like, if I ever could have everybody know some of the basic things, like that could change their lives, but in very simple ways. Those things were,
sweet,
great content stuff.
Right. So it's like things that are like, what are the basics that you want people to know? Kind of like whether you're educating people on a topic, or what's the resource that you could share with them, like that's the thing that you want to make the podcast about. Another thing, so it's like a kind of slightly different spin on it, is if you have an onboarding process, what are things that are involved in that? So for example, when I worked at Epifio, the explainer video company, one of the things that I would always do with my clients was I would do a pre-kickoff call. So I would sit down with the main point of contact, usually it was on a video call if I could, and just walk them through a couple different just preliminary things to make sure we're on the same page. What's the relationship between time, the timeline, the budget, and the quality? So just helping them understand, like, okay, when all these things are working together, like we're in a good spot. The kind of feedback that you give, what kind of feedback should you give at what point in the process, and letting them know that, if we do something later on in the process, it's going to massively change the timeline and the budget of the video. There's just different things like that where you want people to just be aware and coming into this. Like there's also this guy, there's a book over here I have called Made by James, and that's his Instagram account, but he's a designer. He does a lot of branding and stuff, but he has these these Instagram reels that he posts where he will kind of I think more like satirically, but like kind of semi-venting, I think, talk about like questions and things that clients will send him. So like one of the ones was something like, how could I get a logo for free? And he's like, make it yourself. Like, things like that. So thinking about like almost like, what are the dumb, for whatever that means for you, like what are the dumb questions that you get that maybe you can kind of reframe, and instead of like venting about it, like could you talk about it in a like, here's why you need to be thinking this way, or here's the reason why this is so valuable for you, instead of why it's so expensive, why it's so valuable, because really we're paying for the value. So anyways, those are the kinds of things. If you're getting a lot of questions about something, if you're getting dumb questions, those are the things you can make podcast episodes on. The next thing is stories. So number 6 is stories. And honestly, I think that's what we're probably going to do the next episode on, is how to interview somebody to get a good story. Cool. So just kind of what are those questions? But yeah, what are the stories? What are the I think specifically, if you can, getting outside voices. And what I mean by outside voices is not the podcast hosts. Okay. So it can be somebody within the organization, but maybe it's somebody else. Maybe it's somebody you've helped. Maybe somebody who's a fan. Maybe it's just somebody of like, man, my audience has to hear this person speak for whatever reason. So trying to get people to tell those stories that go along with whatever your podcast is about. So if it's about marketing, if it's about that small business I talked about who helps families stay safe on the internet, like maybe you can talk about, people, get people who work at Google, or maybe you get people who like are in charge of filtering softwares, or different things like that. Get them on your podcast and talk about. Maybe you get maybe there's a mom that you helped. She had no idea what to do, and you helped her, and now she's like, it was great because now it's all set up and I actually know how to use it, and it's super simple the way it is. So things like that. Who are the fans? Who are the people who have been impacted? Who are the people that your audience has to listen to?
Cool. This seems like a dumb question. Yeah. But is it okay to mix all of these in your podcast? Like,
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I would say I don't think there is one way to do this. I think this is just a list of ways of getting content, and so you can do all these different things. You can sometimes have interviews. You could sometimes have product reviews. You could sometimes do listener questions. Depending on your podcast and the amount of content you have, maybe you do segments and you do all 3, or you do some here, like.
And when you say segment, like
take in one podcast episode, you do. Hey, we're going to start out with some listener questions, and then we're going to have a story, and then we're going to do a product review or something like that. Okay. It just depends on how much content you have. Most people, they don't have the time to like do all of those things in one episode. So maybe split them up. But maybe you do. And there's a lot of podcasts out there that do all of them and kind of have different segments. Okay. So yeah, totally.
Cool. That's fine.
Number 7, I got two more ideas for generating topic ideas. One that's free and easy is literally going to YouTube, going to the search bar, just start typing in a couple words, but then YouTube gives you a list of auto-filled questions of things that people actually search. So the things that pop up are not just random. Those are the top things that people search based off of how you started that search. Okay. So just go there, start typing stuff out, and again, it might clarify for you, are you phrasing things in the correct way to get the right answer? So that's one thing that you can do. You'll get, I think what's helpful about that is you'll get a clear topic name, or title for your YouTube video for the episode title, but then you can use that to create the topic in the episode. So just because it's named something doesn't mean, when something's named something specific, it's because that's how people type it in. So like when people type in something, there's actually maybe a deeper thing that you want to talk about that you think would be helpful for them. So title your podcast episode that, but then you actually, maybe you start out with saying that, but then you lead into the concept that actually applies to that title. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So
So you title your podcast in a way that
for
will hit the most
searchability.
people.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean you have to talk only about that thing. Or
not only about that thing, and not exclusively that thing in the way that the episode is titled.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. And then the last thing is really get a friend who asks good questions, or like hire a coach consultant person. Like if you are stuck in that, bringing in an outside voice to help you figure out and brainstorm, like, okay, you're not in it, can you help me think through these things? You know, I think that is sometimes, I mean, you've done this for me. I've had other people do it for me. And I've done it for other people where, yeah, it's just like I'm kind of stuck in my own head. Again, we've talked about this before, but you know all the things. Help me break down, what do people actually need to know? I'll start talking. Whoa, what's that concept? Talk to me about that. Why is that important? And they can kind of help you filter out, okay, that's not helpful, that's not super important. Wait, no, people actually do need to know that.
Right.
So getting a friend who asks good questions, or hiring somebody like me or a coach or a consultant who can help you think through those things could be really helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, you know, just again, you can use, you know, YouTube or Answer the People. You can get listener questions. You can do all these things. The biggest thing is keep a running list. As you hear things, as you come up with ideas, keep a running list of these things. And then just as you feel like it makes sense, start writing up. And we can do another, maybe we'll do an episode, maybe we'll just do a YouTube video on this, but just like how to actually like come up with a podcast episode. How do you come up with a flow that makes sense?
Yeah, that can be helpful.
But yeah, like write it down, start compiling an outline for the podcast, and then start recording. And then you'll have a kind of, really, I think you can have like an indefinite list. And especially if anything you're talking about is time bound, you can revisit that throughout the year. So I'm thinking about that small business that we talked about. If you're helping families stay safe on the internet, man, maybe annually be like, all right, for 2023, here's the things that we're gonna talk about, or do a year in review, and then in 2024, here's the things to be looking at in 2024. You can do some of the exact same topics, but just for that year.
Yeah.
If some of the stuff is seasonal. So thanks so much for watching.
Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you can get notified when new episodes come out.
And if you have any questions, you can click the link in the description to submit your questions. And if we feel like we have anything helpful to say, we'll include it in a future episode.